There's a movement brewing, and that movement is the MeTotal lifestyle.
It centers around you keeping your sense of self intact and in gaining clarity of purpose as you age. I'm Carrie.
I'm Joe.
I'm JM.
And we're on a mission to show you how to enjoy friends, fellowship, and life without substance dependence.
It's time to discover how you can begin living a MeTotal lifestyle.
Right here on the FUZZEE'ish podcast. Let's go.
We just got done interviewing Dave Albin of Tony Robbins fame, of firewalking fame. He's the number one firewalking guy in the world. And he decided to take a break and hang out with us.
He did it for Oprah.
Did it for Oprah. He's done it for Google. He's done it for a lot of different companies and influencers and celebrities and people. What were your take on the interview? What do you think our audience can expect from this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I think just out the gate, just a lot of energy. So you're truly going to be engaged. And, you know, if you're just looking for something in your life right now, maybe you just feel like you're in a little bit of a rut. I think this is going to be a great episode for people to listen to and just kind of get that little pick me up to get out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think the thing that we didn't necessarily talk a lot about, because it was a lot of listening to Dave, was we talk about with MeTotal, there's not really a 0 and 1 equation to it, and that for some people the 12 steps really matters. Here's a guy who's a profound example of the success of AA and continues to sort of strive to live by that mantra, and I'm a huge fan of that. I mean, we as a group are a huge supporter. You know, we're not here to say our walk or our path is the right one. We want to be supportive of all the paths, and certainly I think he had such a great amount to share specific to the fact that he's still on this planet because of AA. And that was an amazing story and something that I found to be incredibly motivating, but also just profound as well. So super excited to hear the episode.
Listeners, tune in. This is going to be a fantastic episode with a lot of high energy. For folks in our audience that are veterans, you don't want to miss this episode. Dave has a lot of heart for the vets, and he speaks specifically to a really cool opportunity that's coming up in April. And he's invited our community out to come celebrate with him a firewalking endeavor on April 13th out in Modesto. So all the vets out there, pay close attention to this episode. You won't regret it. Dave Albin is the number one firewalk instructor in America. Firewalking is a 1,000-year-old rite of passage ritual where you literally walk across hot, burning coals. Having worked for Tony Robbins for 19 plus years and starting Firewalk Productions in 2014, Dave has firewalked hundreds of thousands of people. He and Tony Robbins set a world record in London in 2005, walking over 12,300 people. His success has a scary and violent past. On June 8, 1988, he put a gun to his head to stop the excruciating pain from both drug and alcohol addiction. 2023 will mark 35 years of sobriety. Dave's clients include Google, NASA, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Heineken, Remax, Entrepreneurs Organization, Chick-fil-A, Crisp Video, Mystery Hill, YMCA, Replace Your University, Tony Robbins, T. Harv Eker, Nate Bailey, the Four Seasons, the Omni Hotel, the Waldorf Astoria, and so many others. Dave, welcome to the show. Welcome to the FUZZEE'ish podcast. I'm your host, Joey Q. And as always, we've got J.M. Guthrie and Carrie Human. And today we've got a special guest with us, Dave Albin, who, for those of you who have listened to the intro to this guy or the bio that I had put on the podcast already, he's got a super interesting background. We're really excited to talk to him today. And I think his background scratches all three of our itches. He can talk about the alcoholism thing, which is definitely a core tenet of what we talk about here. But he's also done some amazing things with firewalks, which I think Carrie Human and his HR background is going to have to investigate a little bit. And just overall good guy, loves brands, has worked with some of the best brands out there. So Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here, man.
Welcome, Dave.
And while we're touching off on things, Dave, I know you've got an important event next year out in California targeted at the vets. I want you to tell me about that in a little bit. But first, some news broke yesterday that the Senate voted to allow VA doctors to recommend medical marijuana to veterans. And there's an anticipated House bill that's going to come down pretty soon. How do we feel about that, boys? Let's go.
Let's go.
What took so long is my first response.
God dang. All right. Let's go.
Yeah. And let's quit calling it marijuana. Let's call it cannabis.
The actual website that I read it from was called Marijuana Moments. I don't think they got the memo yet that we're trying to destigmatize.
Yeah.
I mean, as the guy who tries to keep the stigma, as quiet as possible on this show, Mr. Quattrone, that's an interesting word for him to use. But I think Carrie and I were thinking the same, Dave, as you. And try hard to use cannabis. But man, what a cool thing, right? I mean, this is something that's so profoundly connected to us as a podcast family, but personally as well as friends outside of this show. And we all feel so strongly about what the impact can be, not only for veterans, but just society generally. And it feels like a perfect day to have our boy Dave on to talk about it, especially with all that he's doing to benefit the veterans that we obviously all hold with high esteem and close to our hearts. So thanks for joining, Dave.
Yeah, it's great to be here, you guys. It's an honor.
Yeah.
So, the idea behind it, being what it is, it's so interesting if you really go back years and years and years and you research it, what happened, the difference between cannabis and hemp, right? Because if you look at the plant, they look identical, right? However, one of them is medicine and the other one you can build anything with, right? Well, I don't think there's anything you can't build with hemp. Henry Ford made a car out of hemp. The oil that lubricated the motor was made out of hemp. The fuel that they made to drive the car was made out of hemp. I think I read one time, it has the second strongest tensile strength, second only to spider webs. And so, when you can make bricks out of it and build houses out of it and rope and canvas and food and clothing, obviously they don't want it out there because it gets in the way of plastics and fiberglass and styrofoam and a lot of things that could, let's just say, probably be replaced with it. So, and now that, it's sister plant, brother plant, whatever you want to call it, with cannabis, and they legalized it for the military and for our veterans. I think you guys already said it. It's about frickin' time.
Yep, that's right.
And I'm going easy on the language there. So yeah,
we like the F word. You can drop it, man, anytime you want. No concern.
Well, it's about time, I always kind of want to, learn my way through the podcast before I start dropping F-bombs. But my God, you have these men and women are suffering immensely. 40 a day, really, and what? Yeah, and it's up to the private sector. Period. There's, I'm at it right now. I'm in it. I got off the phone today with Black Rifle Coffee Company out in Utah, and they're all veteran owned, and if you've ever seen any of their ads, they're crazy as fuck, man. They do some serious shit. They're funny as hell, and they're a great company. They got a great product, and so I'm talking to them. I'm talking to another company in Utah called MIT 45. They make kratom, and then I'm also talking to another company out there called doTERRA, and they make a really great essential oil. And so with those three companies right now is kind of where my focus is in Zippo. And, I'm going after every vet I can get my hands on. So, yeah, great. April 13th, there we are. We're in Modesto. Great guy out there, Ed Barclay. He's the president of the Rotary out there. And he had been watching me over here on some of these other podcasts. And he knew that I wanted to go into the veterans and see how many we can save. And so he was watching me. Well, the first event we were talking about doing, unfortunately, the venue was great. The intent, everything was there. But when the municipality got there to do the site inspection, they showed up with 10 people. And when I saw 10 people show up, and they had me on Facebook, tapped into it. And when I said, oh boy, this ain't good. 10 people, no, we don't need 10 people. It's way too many cooks in the kitchen. We need one. I need a fire marshal. That's all I need. And so I knew it was going to unravel, and it did. So Ed was over here, and he just said, well, listen, man, come to Modesto. I can get it done here. He goes, the sheriff of the town here is one of my good friends. So he was right. So that's where we're headed. We'll be there April 13th. Right now, we've got about 100 vets. It's probably going to grow to 200, maybe 300. And so we're going to be inviting any of these corporate accounts who want to come and say, look, just come. Come look at it. Come see me. Watch what I'm going to do and watch the magic happen. Because I'm going to do something that's just way, way more than just the firewalk, right? I mean, when a vet comes back, why do they take their life? Well, I've been in the personal development industry for over 3 decades. It's real simple. They lose purpose, man. You're over there together. You're fighting together as a unit. You're keeping each other alive as a unit. You're eating, sleeping. You're doing everything together. So your purpose is way up here. And then you come home and you get fragmented. And now you're away from all of it. And the next thing you know, depression sets in. Purpose comes down. Depression goes up. Next thing you know, they're reaching for something. They're reaching for a beer or a scotch or some kind of drug, and the next thing you know, man, we lose them.
That's actually a very good segue, Dave. So, audience members that are out there listening, we're going to get back to this. We're going to come full circle and talk about all the good stuff that Dave's going to do out in California next year, all the great stuff he's doing in market related to the firewalks. But I want to rewind the clock because obviously, while we know that cannabis does a lot of good specifically for vets, we also know that alcohol, it's one of the reasons why we have this podcast, does a lot of harm. It's a very toxic substance. Rewind the clock back to 30-something years ago, I think you said it was. Tell us a little bit about your origin story and how you kind of, were growing up in California and how you started interacting with alcohol and how that sets you on a different trajectory.
Sure. Well, if I start at the beginning, a couple of months before I was born, my biological father had hurt his head somehow. We're not really sure. And they put a plate in his head to save his life. Well, 2 months before I was born, he'd tell my mom quite often that he didn't know how much longer he could stand the pain. And sure enough, 2 months before I'm born, he turns to her and says, "Hey, I'm going to the grocery store." We never saw or heard from him again. So when I was born to a single mom. And she already had 2 boys, another cousin and a grandmother. So there was 6 of us living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hollywood, California. Mom's working at the Roosevelt Hotel. Now she came from that, what I call the greatest generation of all time, which is the one that, my parents came from, right? Because, when the men were off fighting the war, right? My dad that raised me, my adoptive dad, he was in Europe fighting the Nazis. My best friend's dad was in Pearl Harbor fighting the Japanese. Well, when the men were all doing this, guess what the women were doing? Everything. Right. Yeah. So they're home building Jeeps and tanks. And my mom was known as Rosie the Riveter, man. She worked for McDonnell Douglas. She was out on the wings building airplanes, man, driving rivets into the wing. So anyway, she was hardworking and she worked her ass off, but it wasn't enough. It just wasn't. She had 6 mouths to feed. And so one day she realized she couldn't feed me anymore. And she went to her oldest sister, Pat, and said, "Hey, Pat, I can't feed David. Will you adopt him?" And she said, "Absolutely." So now my aunt and uncle, Bob and Pat Albin, took me from Hollywood to Long Beach. And so my life changed immensely, obviously. And it was awesome, man. I mean, I had the perfect life. My dad was military. He was an officer. We had money. We had a nice house. We went on camping trips. We went all over. And then when I was 11, the first day of summer, 1964, Mom came and got me and brought me in the kitchen on the first day of summer, set me down, and she said, "David, we need to tell you something." And she looked at me and she had tears in her eyes and she put her hand on my hand and she said, "David, what we need to tell you is we're not your parents." Okay. What the hell does that mean? What do you mean you're not my parents? It's like walking me outside, sky's blue, and they go, "Sky's not blue." It looks pretty blue to me. So the bottom line was, she went on to tell me that my Aunt Dean was my mother. And I remember thinking, I don't even like her, man. It's like, she's a trip, right? Because here was the thing. Every time she was around me, she wanted to be around me. Right? She wanted to hold me and kiss me and hug me. And well, duh, I was her son. But hell, I didn't know that going on. I didn't know that was going on then, right? So shortly after they told me this, again, this is on the first day of summer, 1964, about a week later, 2 weeks later, they both started drinking. They had sworn off alcohol when they adopted me at 5, and things got ugly really fast. Bob, not a nice guy when he's drinking. Violent, horrible guy. When he's sober, great guy. Not when he's drinking. Pat, on the other hand, she was more of a funny drunk, kind of a, passed out a lot, that kind of thing. And so one day they went to the grocery store, and I knew where the booze was. They were hiding it in plain sight. I went over to the cabinet, pulled out the bottle. It was a bottle of brandy. It was a half gallon. Took a coffee cup, filled it halfway, boom, at 11 years old. And you know what, gentlemen? You'll appreciate this. I never had a chance. I was an alcoholic on the spot. There was a lot of alcoholism. There's a lot of alcoholism in my family. Wow. And it just got progressively worse from there. By the time I was a junior in high school, right, they brought me in one day to the principal's office and said, Albin, you're a threat to our school. Out. You're done. And so I was okay with that. I didn't care. Didn't bother me. I didn't care if I was in high school or not. I didn't think there was anything they were going to teach me that was going to help me make money anyway. There was a song back then by Paul Simon. And one of the lyrics of that song was, when I think back of all the crap I learned in high school, it's a wonder I can think at all. Right? That was my theme song, man. And so, I just, then drugs came into the scene. And the next thing I know, I'll fast forward this. I'm in my third marriage. It's June 8th, 1988. I'm married to a woman. She's got 3 kids. I'm in really bad shape. I'm living in the basement. They're living upstairs. And when I woke up that morning, I said, that's it. I'm done. I am not doing this anymore. And so my only thought in that moment to stop the pain, the excruciating emotional and physical pain, was to put a bullet in my head. And as I loaded the pistol, I put it in my mouth, and I'm thinking, you know what? Hold on a second, man. Because when you pull that trigger, maybe your problems are over, but the problems for your family upstairs, they just begin. You're going to ruin those 3 kids' life upstairs. You can't do that. Suck it up, pal. Come up with another way. You got to figure out another way around this. And so the next thing I know, I've got a thought in my head, call Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, you know what's interesting about that, gentlemen? I don't even know who the hell AA is at that moment. I didn't know anybody in AA. I'd never been to an AA meeting, and yet there it is. And so I did. I called, and I got a wonderful woman on the other end of the phone. And over the years, this woman saved my life, no doubt about it. And I have affectionately nicknamed her Madge over the years. And the reason I did is because she talked like this, right? She probably smoked 2 packs of Pall Mall non-filters a day. And she was an ass-whooping woman, man. She was in my shit. She was asking me questions. She's the gatekeeper, right? So that's her job. And so if you talk to her the right way and you answer the right questions, she'll actually call somebody to come get you.
Right.
And apparently I must have said enough things, and she did. She sent a guy to come get me. His name's Lauren. And he came and picked me up that day and took me to my first AA meetings, because I went to a 12:30, a 4:30, a 6:30, and an 8:30. Wow. And as you know, when you get to AA, by the way, it's an all-men's group. They give you one of these bad boys, right? 24-hour chip with the Serenity Prayer on the back. And they also took a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they opened up the front cover, and they wrote, before you take that first drink, call one of us. And they put their first name and their phone number, and then they sent me home with that. Well, the next morning, I'm struggling, man. Guys, remember, man, I'm grossly addicted to heroin, cocaine, alcohol. I am struggling. It's hard. And my phone rings at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's guy John from AA. And I pick up the phone, and hello, and he goes, hey, Dave, it's John from AA. He goes, how you feeling this morning? And I'm thinking, how do you think I'm feeling? I want to kill somebody, and I might start with you for calling me at 8 o'clock in the freaking morning. And he's like, John's a really cool guy. He's like, yeah. He goes, I hear you. He said, hey, man, listen, last night we were talking. I know where you live. I live right around the corner from you. He said, let me do this. Let me come pick you up, and let me come take you to breakfast. I'm threatening this guy. And what's he doing? He pulls up to my house, picks me up, takes me to breakfast, and takes me to an AA meeting. Well, that's it, man. That's AA for you. That's how it works. And so 2 days turned into a week turned into a month, and in a month I got another chip. Then I got one at 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and then 1 year. And yeah, I picked up this one this last year on June 8th for 35 years.
35 years.
So,
congratulations, man.
Amazing.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
What a story. And I didn't want to stop you, but when you explained or shared that moment of clarity about the people upstairs, like, God bless you, because you're right. And, to all the points that you've made and I'm sitting here crying just listening to that story, but to all the other stuff you talked about earlier about the 40 a day, if only they could have had that clarity, because there's 40 people that left those 3 kids with a life to figure out. And we talk about lightweight, middleweight, and heavyweight on this podcast in regards to our consumption of substance. And Carrie, I think we might have our super heavyweight joining us today. So, man.
Yeah, Dave, I was just going to chime in. Really appreciate you sharing that. There was a moment when you expressed sort of like this frustration, like there was kind of like this catalyst moment when you put the gun to your mouth. But I'm just curious, like, what has your experience been with your intuition? Because it sounds like you had a couple of different voices kind of going off in your head, and the voice you chose was sort of this voice of reason that kind of led you down a brighter path. Have you always been in touch with that intuition? If not, if so, could you just tell us a little bit more about how you knew to kind of latch on to that voice and not the other one?
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. I've got my little good guy. He jumps up on my right shoulder, and I got the little asshole, and he jumps up on the left shoulder. And this guy over here on the left is telling me, run the red light, screw that girl, do this, do that, all the shit you're not supposed to do. And this one over here I've been tuned into him for a long time. And he was the one that was basically, hold on, man, do it. No. You're going to ruin those kids' life. And so I've had conversation with some people in psychiatry and psychology, and they both said the same thing. Dude, you had a moment of compassion because you thought about someone else rather than just yourself, right? Put a bullet in your health and end it all on your own. Well, you self-centered shithead. I mean, yeah, that's really great. No, absolutely not. And that's something that I'm going to incorporate into the do no harm, Operation Do No Harm, right? Because here's what I'm going to do. When these vets come to the firewalk, here's what we're going to do. And I'm so glad you asked this question, because the first thing I'm going to get them to do, when I get them in the room, they're going to take an oath. I'm going to have them swear to do no harm to themselves or anybody else. And when veterans take an oath, guess what? They follow through on it, right? So that's the first step. One of the other things we're going to do is after they do the firewalk, I'm going to bring them back in the room. We're going to give them a medallion. And the medallion is going to be Operation Do No Harm. And it might have the Serenity Prayer on the back. I don't know yet, but I want them to put it in their hand. And I'm going to make them, and I'm going to tell them, I want you to squeeze that thing as hard as you possibly can. I mean, I want you to feel all the pain you can imagine from that coin, as much as you can stand. Because that, my friends, is just a little tiny example of the pain that your friends and family are going to suffer through if you take your own life. So, you know what I mean? So we're going to fully associate them to that intention, right? Because we all have it. We have our instincts. We have our intuition. We just got to get them dialed into it. And then, of course, there's a bunch of other things I'm going to do at the firewalk as well to get them entrenched, to get them involved, to raise that purpose back up for them. Because I also want them to recruit. Call it a multi-level marketing program. I don't care what you call it, man. It's my way of implementing Amway, if you will, into the process. Because now once we've got them over here, I want them to go recruit. And so, I'm pretty sure, gentlemen, this is going to go viral. And so, again, the whole idea just comes back to, you guys know, right? What does AA say? You got the 12 steps over here, and that changes your life. You got the 12 traditions that keep the group as a whole moving the right way. Well, in the middle is the preamble. And the preamble, and I've lived by this creed ever since I heard it. And that was, when anyone anywhere reaches out, I want the hand of AA to be there. And for that, I'm responsible.
So we've learned a little bit more about your prehistory, kind of those early days of substance abuse and stuff like that. But real quick, for those of our listeners who don't know Fireworks, I just want to quick plug FUZZEEishpodcast.com. That's where all of you can go and catch up with all of our episodes. But in this particular episode, we're talking about Dave Albin. He's known as one of the world's foremost firewalking experts. Tell us what firewalking is. I know it's been around for thousands of years, but I'm pretty sure that not every one of our listeners knows what we're talking about here.
Yeah, right. So the act itself is you build a big fire and you let it burn for hours and you burn hardwood and then it renders. And then when it renders, it lays out that you've got this big pile of beautiful coals. And basically what you do, depending on the size of the show, like when I was with Tony, we set a world record in London in 2005. So we built a big ass fire and let it burn all day. And then at the end, what we do is we take wheelbarrows over to that pit and we load the wheelbarrows load the coals in a wheelbarrow. Then we take the wheelbarrow and we lay 2 lanes of sod on each side of that wheelbarrow. And sod meaning grass, which is about 3 feet wide. It's about 15 to 18 feet long. And then we take a flathead shovel into that wheelbarrow and we sprinkle those coals on top of the grass, and that's what you walk on. So it's literally fire walking. But as you said, 1,000 years old. Fire walking has been used for a rite of passage. It's a ceremony. It's a graduation. It's a birth. It's a lot of different things. So if you look at the Tahitians or the people of India or the Polynesians, the Hawaiians, the Native American Indians, people of Portugal, Spain, it's been all over. In the West, we're just not that we're not that familiar with it until Tony Robbins brought it here some 30 years ago. And he researched it. He knew what the act was. To my knowledge, I don't think there's anything you can have somebody do than a firewalk that will be that life-changing and cause such a huge paradigm shift. Because I'll tell you this, when it's your turn to walk and you walk up to those coals and you look down and they're bright red and that wheelbarrow's there and you feel the heat coming off, your shit shows up, man. It's your turn, man. And you know what? Like Oprah said at her firewalk, she's like, after she did her firewalk in 2010, the cameras go with her and they're interviewing her, and she's looking back at the fire and she's going, this was unreasonable. She goes, mammals are starting to run from fire, right? But what's interesting about Oprah's firewalk is that, number one, you can see what's going on in her head before, and then you can see what happens immediately once she gets to the other side. She's jumping up and down and celebrating like a child. She's losing her shit. She's so happy. And then the cameras go over with her, and then she makes one of the biggest business decisions of her life. Right there on camera. She created what's called the next chapter. Now, I've firewalked tens of thousands of people, and I've seen it. I know. I was in the same position. When it was my turn to firewalk, when I went to my first event, I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. That's some crazy shit. Yeah, I want to see Tony because he's got great content. So I'm not going to do the firewalk. I dismissed it. And I got some help from one of Tony's people. And when I firewalked in that moment, there were 3,500 people. It was exhilarating, you guys. I'm telling you, man, when you get to the other side, you're jumping up and down. Your self-belief, your self-confidence, your self-worth just goes boom. And at that moment, you think you can do anything. I mean, literally, it's like looking around going, hey, people, where's the bus? Let's go climb Everest. I mean, holy shit. So the reward of the act itself is immediate. You don't have to wait a week or a day. No, that shit pays off right now. But I'll tell you where the most interesting part for me was and how I ended up being where I am today in the firewalking community. And that was, so when I went to Tony's event, it's a 4-day event. We do the firewalk on day one, the night thereof. And then the next day on day two, when we all came in after the firewalk, I'd never seen or witnessed anything like it in my entire life. People were so genuine. They were so humanistic. They're standing in the foyer getting ready to go into the venue, right? And man, they're talking and they're laughing and they're hugging and crying. And I'm sitting back and I'm watching. I'm like, holy shit. What did we do? Did we drink the Kool-Aid last night? Well, we sure as hell did, right? And so I've never seen anything like it other than a Tony Robbins seminar. And so what happened from there, later on in the event, I met one of Tony's trainers. And I'm talking to him and I'm like, so dude, being in this environment on a regular basis must be freaking awesome. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm here 10, 12 events every year. And I said, man, that would be so awesome to be in this environment because it's so therapeutic, it's so encouraging and motivating. Right. I mean, because you're in there with other like-minded people, right? It's like being in class with a bunch of Navy SEALs, if you will. And all of a sudden, so he says, hey, listen, you see all those people over there with the black shirts with the red writing on it? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, dude, those are volunteers. They're just like you. They came to an event, came to a firewalk, and they've come back as a volunteer to get back. He said, so if you want to put yourself in this environment, when you go home, call Robbins Research and ask for a volunteer crew application. And so I did. Well, hell, 9 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Said, Dave Albin, congratulations. You've been selected to crew with the Anthony Robbins companies. And that's how it all really kind of came together. Because when I got to AA, I had insomnia, really bad. And so I was up late at night all the time. My sleep patterns were all over the place. And I was up late one night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and guess who was on the infomercial? Tony Robbins, man. There he was. And I couldn't stand his ass when I first saw him on TV. I thought, what a pompous ass, man. He's all motivated and shit, right? And I'm not motivated. I'm miserable, right? But when I was watching the infomercial, he said two things that completely got me. The first one he said was, we'll do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. Well, anybody that's got substance abuse knows what that's like, right? Because we're either chasing something pleasurable or we're running away from pain, right? With alcohol and drugs. So that resonated with me. But the one that really got me was, he said, the deciding factor in our life. In other words, how do we make decisions in life? He said, they come from either inspiration or desperation. And I remember thinking, holy shit. It was like he was talking directly to me. And so I bought his program. He was selling a program. It was called Personal Power. 30-day program for total success, he called it. Sold by Gunthy Ranker. And it came in a big box, and I ordered it. And it came on these little white things called cassette tapes, right? And some of your listeners are going to go, what the hell is a cassette tape? There is a Smithsonian. They're right next to reel-to-reel and 8-track tapes, right? And so, yeah, man, I plugged it in, and I went through it. I did what Tony taught me to do. And, the next saying, boom, 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 series of events, I ended up working for the man just shy of 20 years.
Wow.
Amazing.
Well, give us a little bit of the highlights over those 20 years. Like, I know you said that you've walked tens of thousands of people. Are there any people that stand out or anybody that taught you lessons along the way other than Tony?
Every single one of them. Yeah, I've literally walked, the numbers are, and I don't say this normally because it's not believable, but it's true. We've walked close to 500,000 people. I mean, hell, Tony and I set a world record in London in 2005. We walked 12,300 people right there in one event. That was a world record. Now, let me be clear here. Guinness Book was not there, so it was never documented. But here's what I know. There's never been a firewalk anywhere close to 12,000 people anywhere in the world other than another Tony Robbins seminar. But to your question, yeah, absolutely. My kids, man. So what happened is that when I started to working for Tony, when he asked me to take over all of his firewalks globally in 2003, I said, Tony, I can't really do that. I homeschool my kids. And he stepped right up and he goes, so if I pay to have your family travel with us, would that help? Yeah, it might, TR. It just might. So my family traveled with us on the road. In fact, their first event was Sydney, Australia. But when they did their first firewalk in New York in 2002, my daughter was 6, man. My son was 9 years old. And so we're at New York, we're doing the event, and Tony knew that my kids were going to walk that night because he had been pre-framed. And they were standing over there in the shadows, man. And after we walked all the participants, Tony waved them over, and here they come. Here come my kids, right? 6-year-old little girl and my son who's 9. And Tony and Vinny came up to the lane, and I took her by one hand, and he took her by the other, and across the fire she went at 6 years old. Wow. My son, Davey, he stepped up. Tony looked at him and said, I love you and I love your daddy. Go! There went Davey. So yeah, you never forget that. You just, it's so ingrained in my mind. There's a ton of people, I loved them all. There was one that does stand out tremendously. We walked this young man in Tampa. So what happened, this kid was a collegiate athlete in high school, and he got hit by a drunk driver, and he lost both legs. And so his whole life just went to shit, that quick, right? And so he can't run, he can't jump, he can't do anything, right? He's thinking nobody will ever marry him, he'll never have kids. I mean, his whole life is deteriorating, and depression's setting in, and he's contemplating suicide. Well, one of his friends apparently said, hey, I know you love Tony Robbins. He's coming to town. Why don't you go see Tony before you make a decision that's a permanent answer to a temporary problem. And so next thing I know, we're out there. We typically do these things after midnight, so it's dark. And I'm on Tony's lane, right? So I shovel his coals and do all that. And all of a sudden, Tony stops and he looks back at me. And he gives me this look like, holy shit, I think we're going to see something really cool. And all of a sudden, here comes this kid, man. And he's got this wheelchair, I don't know how to call it, 3.0, kind of a turbo wheelchair. He can move it around kind of a thing, probably made out of titanium. And so he wheels the wheelchair up to the fire lane. And Tony bends down to say something to him. And this kid pushes him off. It's like, go, nope, I've got this, man, go. And all of a sudden, that kid, man, he moved his wheelchair. And the next thing, he had a lot of upper body strength, and he positioned his torso, and he flipped himself, boom, landed on his hands, and walked across the fire on his hands.
Holy smokes.
Unreal.
Right. So that was one of those moments where you go, okay, I get it. That's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. Right. So, but there was a lot of that. Right. I mean, because again, when you look at the apprehension on somebody's face when they're standing, in the staging area of the fire lane, and then, 4 seconds later, they go from, oh my God, to, oh my God, right? It's that quick. And so it's just a beautiful thing to watch. And I invite you guys, if you guys can come to Modesto, come out, be my guest. You guys can be a part. You can hang out and watch us do what we do. And
I'll do the fuzzy firewalk and we'll hang out with you guys.
Dave,
I
got a question real quick on the firewalk thing. Is there something, obviously there's a almost spiritual reaction and that manifests as part of the action itself.
Yeah.
Is there a scientific definite, like what is it that happens that allows you to do that? Can we get some?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I get asked all the time. Okay. So the coals are 1,000 degrees.
Right.
How the hell can you walk on coals at 1,000 degrees and not burn the shit out of yourself? And my answer is, I don't have a freaking clue. I don't know. I mean, I've got my own hallucinations, it's like if you look at MMA fighters, right? When they're going into the ring, or a professional athlete or an Olympian or whatever, or even maybe you're going out on Broadway for the first time, right? You've got a certain intensity, right? Your body is, you're moving it, right? And so when you have that much emotion going on in your head, plus motion of your body, there's a lot of energy that's being put out through your hands and through your feet. You can literally, they have cameras that can take pictures of the energy coming out of your feet and your hands. So I don't know, maybe that's part of it. I think for me, it's more of a belief system. It's more of a mindset. It's like if I walk out and submit and I say, and I pay homage to the fire, I trust it, I believe in it, and I show love and take my ego's in check, I can walk across it all day long. The firewalks that we do with Tony are 15 to 18 feet long. We've done life mastery with Tony, and it's 40 feet. I've done a 100-foot firewalk. So, and can you burn yourself? Absolutely. Of course you can. The coals are 1,000 degrees. But here's what I tell people. Look, so you get a little blister on your foot. So what? Who cares? At the end of the day, life's going to kick your ass. And here's what I know. What we don't overcome, the fears we don't overcome, become our limits. Yeah. And we know pretty much in the world of sports and things, everything else, is that, again, it just comes down to the fear, right? Because what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you.
Right.
Right? Yeah. You don't become a Navy SEAL by sitting in a classroom. You become a Navy SEAL when they put your happy ass out in the water at 3 o'clock in the morning off the coast of San Onofre so that you can swim with 7 types of killer sharks, right? So that's really it. There's a really powerful energy that goes on. Now, we teach that at, when I do my firewalks, but I also teach the other way to do it. Because the Cherokee Indians and a lot of the other cultures around the world, they don't firewalk that way. They just walk up, they look up, they trust, they put their hands up in the air, and they just walk. So it's either or. My thing is I tell people, look, just make sure you got your ego in check. I've seen guys, when we bring everybody out to do the firewalk, every once in a while you see these guys, and there's always men, and here they come. They've got their ego and they're running out there, and then they run up to the fire lane and they start screaming at the fire. Like, I own you, man, you're mine. And I'm going, oh, dude, I wouldn't do that if I were you. This may not work out well for you. And literally, they go out, they take like the first step or the second step, and their happy ass jumps off the lane, man. And so the fire's not going to allow that. Again, there's some real magic going on out there, you guys, but I don't pretend to know or understand the science. All I know is that, if you bring the right attitude and the right mindset to the fire, and you, again, very humble about what you're going to do, you can walk across it all day long, and you won't even get a little blister.
So you're not with Tony anymore, but you run your own business now. You're an entrepreneur, and companies from all over the world pay you to come out and put on these fireworks. Tell us a little bit more, because Carrie Human, our co-host over here, has an extensive background in HR and people management in the corporate world. Tell us a little bit about some of those companies and why do they want their employees going on firewalks?
Great question. So my very first corporate job. So in 2014, I'm working for Tony. I'm driving down the road. My phone rings, and guess who it is? Google. So Google's calling me, and they're like, "Hey, are you the Dave Albin does the firewalks for Tony Robbins? Yeah, what can I do for you?" They said, "Well, if you're not under any contractual obligation or non-compete, we'd like to talk to you about hiring you." I'm like, "Okay, well, homeboy's a free agent. What you got?" And so they had 148 executives that were graduating from a 9-month curriculum that Google and the University of North Carolina had written the curriculum for. So they wanted to do the graduation, and then they wanted to do the paradigm shift experience to anchor it in, right? Google knows something we don't know? Not exactly. So, and then they wanted to have lunch. So when they originally talked to me, they wanted to do it in the middle of the day. And I go, "Guys, you can't do it in the middle of the day. We got to do it at night. I've got to be able to see the coals. I got to be able to see the color, the temperature, so I can regulate it. And I do that by hitting it with a shovel, and there's things that I do, right, to do that. And I said, so we can't really do the firewalk during the day unless you want to move it to that evening. I said, now I tell you what we could do. We could do a glass walk. And they're like, a glass walk? You mean walk on broken glass? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, ooh, tell us about that. And so,
please give me some pain, please.
yeah. We went. So, how do you walk on glass? It's called physics. It's real simple. So the bottom line is we got in there, and I did Google twice. We did one year, and then we did it the following year. But here's the thing. Here's what Google knows. Here's what big companies know. Look, back to what I said. What doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. You want a corporate event, and you take them golfing? What do you think that's going to cause some kind of life-changing, experience? No, they're going to be pissed off because John wins the damn thing every single year. They hate John anyway, and there we are playing golf, or you're playing blackjack, or you're got a whatever kind of event that they want to try to put together, right? So the bottom line is, if you want a paradigm shift, then you're going to have to do something that causes motion and emotion to come together at the same time. That's what changes people, right? So that's, and from Google, the next thing and by the way, after I did Google, I went back to Tony. That's when I retired. And so after Google, I went to NASA, and then Notre Dame, and then Virginia Tech, and then RE/MAX, Chick-fil-A, and Microsoft, and Heineken, and YMCA, and high schools. I mean, it came at me from every angle. Everything from a high school all the way to Google, everything in between. So when people come to me, typically there's 3 things going on. 1, they're in a shitter. The company's got dissension. Everybody's arguing. Nobody's getting along. Everybody loves Donald Trump. Everybody hates Donald Trump. Nope, I'm not wearing a mask. Fuck your mask. I'm not, I'm getting a vaccine. I'm not getting it. Oh, shut the fuck up already. Because all that's going to do is create dissension within the tribe. We know that, right? If everybody's not getting along and they're fighting about a bunch of worthless bullshit, then what's going to happen? Production goes down. And any good CEO knows if they don't fix it, well, what do you think the shareholders are going to do? Out you go, Mr. CEO. So you better fix it. So that's one, right? They bring me in to help correct the dissension. Another time they hire me is when, things are okay. It's not bad, it's not good, it's not bad, but they need a shot in the arm. Boom, they hire me to come in and do that. I have been hired when they are kicking ass. And I love that one. I love coming in because now they're already up there in that 98 percentile and they want to kick it up just a little bit higher. Or maybe they're launching a product or something like this. So typically when somebody hires me, they know that I'm going to come in and create a really extremely powerful evening for the troops. So when they come in on Monday morning, you got a whole different group and how they're getting along. Now, here's something I did that I designed now for the veterans, right? So as I mentioned earlier, they're going to take an oath. The other thing I'm going to do with that is I'm going to bring in the board break, right? Martial arts. Any dojo in America, when you go through their process, their belt graduations, every time you get a belt and you graduate, you're probably going to break a board with something. Your hand, your elbow, your knee, your foot, whatever. and then you graduate, right? So it's been around in martial arts for years. So I took the board break experience, and here's what I did. I want them to write something on front of the board they want to move towards. I have them write something on back of the board that they need to move away from. And then I have them write anybody's name on the board that they're in conflict with. We need to clear that shit out, right? Because if forgiveness or reconciliation is part of the relationship that you have with this individual, that shit is over tonight. You're going to give it to the fire. And then to create the rite of passage, I have them write anybody's name on the board that they've lost. Now, for a veteran, if they lost somebody when they were deployed, right, that brings that to, their energy, if you will, and their love to the actual experience. So once they fill all that out, we take them outside. We have board break stations, and then we'll just have them break the board. And then they take the board, they throw it into the fire. Now, obviously, we're going to get that on video and still pictures of that. And then after they do that, they do the firewalk. And then here's kind of the icing on the cake. After they've done the board break, thrown the board in the fire, they've done the firewalk, then I'm going to put them on what I call the heart hug. And so instead of hugging this way like we normally do, right, I do it the opposite way. So that way my heart is sitting on the other person's heart. And then I have them take 3 cleansing breaths. Deep diaphragmatic breathing, tons of oxygen into the diaphragm. And when we come into or out of that second breath, typically somewhere right in that part, your hearts calibrate. So they start beating at the same time. Now, I'll do that several times, probably close to 6 times. And, every time I do that, basically what I do is I have them look across and say, find somebody, and once you make eye contact with them, don't take your eyes off them. Now, go to that person. So again, that's how I set it all up. Now, when I first set it up, they have no idea what I'm doing, other than the whole idea is to get, everybody's heart to be beating at the same time. Then once we've done that, then like I said, I take them back in, I put the coin in their hand, they squeeze it, they associate the pain to what's going to happen to their family or friends if they take their own life. Another thing that's happening in that process is we're going to give them one of the necklaces. We have a necklace, right? It's got my logo on it, so we're going to give them one of these. Another thing we give them is one of these. I don't know if you can see that, but that's the coal from their firewalk, right? So it's going to say on the front, Operation Do No Harm, and then it'll say, I firewalked in 2024, so they get to take that home with them. And then Zippo is, I went to them when I was there a couple of weeks ago, and I said, hey, will you guys design one for the vets? And they said, oh, absolutely. So here's what Zippo's going to do. They're going to take a 1941 replica of the lighters that they made during World War II. And in World War II, you guys don't know this, but Zippo gave out their lighters. They gave them away. And they gave them to GIs who got deployed to Germany or to go fight the Germans. I know. My dad had one. And so they're going to take the 1941 replica. They're going to powder coat it black. And then they're going to laser in Operation Do No Harm. And it's going to kind of give it a 3D look. It'll almost glow in the dark. They're going to be freaking gorgeous. And we're going to give those to the vets as well.
I've never wanted a lighter so bad. That's amazing. That's so cool. So one question I have for you, because I know a lot of people that do like extreme things for just like the sake of doing extreme things, like doing the polar plunge and stuff like that. Yeah. Where do you rank the coals and doing the firewalks in comparison to cold plunges or jumping out of airplanes and stuff like that? Like for the thrill seekers out there, people that are already kind of on a MeTotal journey where they're trying to better their life, but they want to still experience something cool like this. Like, where do you put firewalk? Is it the very top? Is it somewhere in the middle?
It has to be way at the top, because you can jump out of an airplane and that's not necessarily going to change your life. You're a thrill seeker. Okay, great. What's next? Like you said, cold plunge. Now, I cold shower every morning. I live up here in the Appalachian Mountains. It's cold. My water's coming out of the ground, and when I do it every morning, it's cold. Now, have I done a cold plunge? Yes. Would I do another one? Sure. But it's not, there's something about the fire. There's something about looking down at that lane, and it's 18 feet long, and those coals are glowing bright red, and that wheelbarrow's there, and you feel that heat. And we've all burned ourselves, and we know how painful that is, right? So there's a certain association to that, because the fire is so mysterious anyway, right? Because who hasn't spent a really wonderful evening sitting around a nice warm fire, making s'mores with your friends and family and created these magical, magical moments and memories, right? And on the other hand, fire will, there's nothing more painful than a burn. Nothing. And that's why I love this whole idea about cannabis. A lot of these guys have been hurt and burnt really bad, and that's going to help with the relief of that. So, from my perspective, because I have done, a lot of that extreme stuff. I surfed growing up in Southern California, some pretty big waves, and, you're out there in the elements and all that. And I've done, climbed to volcanoes and things of this nature. And that's all cool. It's all fun. And it's, really, really neat, and say, I did that. But again, back to the firewalk, there's something about it that's absolutely magical. And the other part of that is that some of those things, some people physically just can't do, right? Whereas, like the kid that firewalked on his hands, right? He made that possible because, and that's another thing that we do. We try to get everybody across the fire. We've had people that didn't have any legs and they didn't have that upper body strength to be able to do it that way. And so what we do is we take a ladder and we lay them on a ladder, and then we carry the ladder. There can be 4 of us, and we can lower them down, and they can actually walk across the fire on their hands as well. So that's a really long answer to, I'm going to leave it up there at the top.
Okay. Real quick, tying it back into alcohol and substance abuse and stuff like that while we're getting ready to wrap up the show here. I know something that you said that was super interesting to me about your origin story with alcohol was that from the moment it touched your lips, you were addicted. Now, 35 years later, having not consumed alcohol, because it was so severe for you, do you still have to take daily precautions to not drink alcohol?
Well, it's alcoholism. It's not alcoholism. If I was to pick up a drink today, having 35 years, I'd be dead in less than probably 24 hours. It didn't go away. It's never going to go away. So from that perspective, I have to give it a tremendous amount of respect. And I still go to AA. I still go pick up my chip, every year and all that. Do I have any thoughts of drinking? No. I haven't had a thought I can't remember. But again, there is a certain respect that I have for it. And I've never ever entertained the idea that, oh, hey, Dave, you're okay now. Bullshit. No, I'm not. I'm not going there. I used to watch this all the time. Guys would come into AA and they get about a month sober and they turn around and go back out, right? And then they come back in. And when they come back in, they always looked a little worse. Not once did they ever come back and go, hey, guys, I figured this shit out. Come here, let me show you what to do, right? That never happened. And I remember thinking, they come back and they always said the same shit. Every single time they go out and come back, here's what they say. I just thought I was, okay. I thought I had a month of sobriety. I thought I had a year. I thought, you know what I mean? And I thought to myself, you know what, Dave? If you ever go out and drink and come back, just do me a favor, man. Well, this is my little guy on my shoulder, right? Going, don't come back in and bullshit these guys. Yeah. And don't come back and think, oh, I thought I was okay. Because I've never believed that, ever.
Pay the man. Pay the man, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
So we like to do a little segment called Products for Practice, and that's why I was kind of leading up to that. So like, for example, when people are going through their walk with sobriety or trying to live a better life, it's not just the liquid itself that you have to replace, it's the rituals that you have to replace around it. So for me, I used to run big, huge beer accounts for Gary Vee back in the day. I couldn't just replace the bottle. I had to replace going to the bar. I had to ask to be off of the AB InBev accounts so I could do other types of work. I had to move out of New York to get away from bar culture. What are some of the things that you've done over the years to get yourself in the right mindset so that you don't have any relapses?
Well, I first of all, I worked the package deal when they gave it to me when I got in. I mean, I knew how sick I was, right? The day I got there, I'd put a pistol in my mouth. So it wasn't like I was like, maybe you're okay. I got a sponsor. I worked the steps. I didn't believe in anything spiritual, but I started praying. And my sponsor told me to get on my knees when I did it. Read the literature. Do the service work. Help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. I mean, I was all in. My mindset is I'm all in. In fact, if any of the guys where I got sober would have told me, listen, Dave, today we want you to go to Times Square and give you 2 hours to draw a crowd, and we want you to kiss our ass when we get there, I'd have done it, right? I would have done anything. Because, it's interesting, you guys, for me, at that moment when I got to AA, the only two places I ever felt at home was in an AA meeting, as that grew and developed, or some shitty little grungy bar somewhere where you might get your head blown off. So I could sit in the corner back there and just drink and talk shit and scream and cry and carry on and act like a fool, right? So I guess I don't think I was once, again, because I was so sick up front, I was at AA every day for almost 2 years. And again, I think there's a 3-year recovery there, right? You got the physical recovery, you have the spiritual recovery, and you have the emotional recovery. And so it took me about 3 years to get to through that part. But for, lucky me, like the hat says, right? Live lucky. Yeah, I've never entertained the idea of trying or thinking ever that I could have another drink of alcohol.
Wow. Shout out to our friends over at Alcoholics Anonymous.
For sure, man.
Boys, you got any other questions to wrap up here with Dave, or should we move on to plugging some of your future events?
I do have a quick one. I feel like we tried to address it earlier, but like, Dave, what do you think changes for most people, between the time when they see those coals up close and they're like, hell no, I'm not doing this, to actually walking over the coals and, being like, whoa, I just did that. What else can I do? Like, are you all sort of pumping them up? Like, what changes for people?
Well, that's a great question, man. I love that, the way you articulated that, because the bottom line is that typically when we're fearful, because a lot of times fear is nothing more than exhilaration without the breath, right? So we're holding our breath. Like, you get scared, you go on a roller coaster and it goes dun, 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 dun. You get to the top. What do? You go, right, and then off the edge you go, right? I do the opposite here. I get them to breathe. Because normally when they walk up, I'm watching them very closely. I've firewalked thousands of people, so I can look at their physiology. I can look at the look on their face, and a lot of times I can tell. Like, I just did a firewalk here last weekend for a local client here, the River Girls, and so a lot of times I can look in their face and I can see that they're walking for something bigger than them, a cause bigger than them. Like, they've lost somebody in their life, or whatever. I can see it in their face. And so I'll bring that up. I'll say, so you're here to walk for something other than you tonight, aren't you? And they always say yes. And I say, all right, great. I love it. So that's your purpose. All right, so now take a nice deep breath in for me and hold it. And so then now they take in a nice deep breath, right? And then when they come up there, one of the things, they're staring at the calls. So one of the first things I say is, eyes up. And so now their eyes up. Now keep your eyes up. Now take a nice deep breath in for me and hold it. And then I'll have them do that 3 times. And so now you get a lot of oxygen into their body, right? And so the fear starts to stabilize. The exhilaration comes up. And then when I say, now when you exhale, I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, and you're ready to go. And so they exhale, 3, 2, 1, boom. And I walk with every single client. I walk right alongside of them and I stop them. And I say, stop, wipe your feet and celebrate. One of the things I'm going to be doing, and I'm just now and I'm also going to be doing this for the veterans, we're going to have essential oils. So when you get to that celebration side, right, it's exhilarating. So you're in a peak state. You feel amazing. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is say, stop, wipe your feet, smell this, right? And as soon as they do that, what's going to happen? It's going to program their central nervous system, right? So it's just like a song. We know how that works, right? You play a really cool song and you go, yes, I love this song. And it brings you out of wherever you are into a really awesome place. Same thing here, but it's more stronger. So this way we're going to be able to give them this oil. They can put it in their pocket. And then anytime they want to go back to that moment, all they have to do is smell it and they're right back at it.
Dave, I have to ask, what essential oil scent? Is it a specific scent or could it be different for everybody?
I think it could be, as long as it's an essential oil of some kind. That's another great question. In fact, we're going to be talking to doTERRA out of Utah, and I'm going to ask them, based on what we're doing, because they have technology, right? They have the research on different oils and the mixtures and so on. I'm literally going to have them create one, and I'm going to call it the firewalk. I mean, literally, I want them to create the oil around the firewalk so that they can smell it. And then again, we'll give it to them. And then that way that oil will be out there and they can take it and put it in their pocket, and they're not feeling good. Grab your coin, remember your purpose, smell your oil, and control. And this all comes down to one thing: state management. And that's, and I think those tools are going to help immensely.
Do people dream about the fireworks? Like, do you hear stories years after the fact? Do people like call you up and tell you that the firewalk is in their dreams or anything like that? Like,
yeah. I mean, I've run into people, and that's interesting. The culture that's created, right? So you know that if you hang out with a bunch of firefighters, you know, there's a camaraderie between firefighters and police officers and veterans and so on. So same thing with the firewalk, right? If you work for a company and you're out there and your company comes to me and we do a firewalk, and 5 years later I run in, this happens a lot actually, and it's happened a lot more lately, which is interesting now that I'm thinking about it. But if you run into somebody that's out there and I facilitated their firewalk, when they see me, they're like, Dave, oh my gosh, right? They're instantly high on life. And, you know, they come running to me and they hug me and they're like, how you doing? It's good to see you. You know what I mean? So that part's created as well. So yeah, it does. Wow. And here's the bottom line. You know, when you do that firewalk, you guys said it a while ago, if you can firewalk and walk on coals that are 1,000 degrees and not hurt yourself, what else can you do? So the good thing about firewalking is once it's programmed into your brain, you can't unprogram it.
There you go.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, this has been an exhilarating conversation. I'm sure JM and Carrie share the sentiment. Where can we have our audience members find you, Dave? Is there a social media handle or a website you want to direct people to?
Yeah, just go to our website. It's the easiest place to get to me. It's firewalkadventures.com. So it's firewalk, all one word, adventures, plural.com. And my other social media, I think LinkedIn's on there, and Instagram and Facebook, and that's as far as I go. I don't do the TikTok thing, and I don't do Twitter. It's just like,
dude.
you know, too much.
I'm with you.
It's like
By
I
the
don't
way,
have time for all that. So yeah, but you can get to us there. My calendar's there. You know, the academy is also there. Okay. I don't know if you guys know this, but I a couple of years ago I started what's called the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy. In fact, I just graduated our class here a couple of weeks ago. So what happens there is that people come up here to the Appalachian Mountains once I interview them and make sure it's good for them and good for us, it's a good fit, and then I teach them all this stuff. So they come to me, they basically spend 5 full days with me, and I show them all this stuff: the firewalk, the glass walk, the board break, the brick break, the arrow break, the rebar bending, all this stuff, how to start your own business, how to approach clients, you know, everything from how to join a chamber of commerce and what to do. So yeah, we have a really extensive class that we do once a year in October. So the next one is in 2024, and that's up on the
Wow.
Very cool. Like a train the trainer.
Dude,
that's really
what
cool.
a motivation,
Train
Dave.
the trainer.
What a motivation. I mean, thankfully you listened to that guy on your right shoulder, because keep doing what you're doing. This has been a special hour for us, and certainly look forward to being a fan of yours, and hopefully, you know, attend either the one with the veterans or one coming up, or maybe we'll sponsor our own or figure out.
I was about to say, if any of our listeners book you, I don't want a commission. I want you to bring us to the firewalk.
That's right.
Well, again, I'd love to have you guys, if you want to come out and see it and really be part of something cool, if you guys want to, you know, all of you, you know, come to Modesto. It's April 13th. And yeah, we're looking for anybody and everybody. If there's a sponsor out there and you go, you know what? Hey, yeah, sure. Let's bring attention to my brand.
Well, both of my grandparents were military. I know JM's got a family history with military. I'm not sure about Carrie's, but it sounds amazing to me. I would love to come out.
Well, if Gary V's listening, come on, Gary, let's go.
Come on,
let's rock,
Gary.
brother.
Come on,
yeah.
brother.
Yeah, man.
Amen.